Hi everybody, this is Mike here again with ADHDIY, and I'm just going to do a real quick tutorial on how to install Utilamaker Cura. It's a slicer, 3D slicer for 3D printers, um, and how to then open an STL file and slice it. And the first step is to just download and install Utilamaker Cura. So we come over here to utilamaker.com. And then once you're there, just going to go ahead and download for free. Select your operating system. I am on Windows. Save. Okay. Alright, now that that's set up, we're just going to go ahead and show in folder real fast. And let's install. Okay, click next. Gotta agree to this. I just leave it as the default there. Gonna go ahead and leave that as the default. And then what you want here is just the default. That's fine. Open STL files with Cura. You can set whatever else you want there, but this is all you need. So we'll go ahead and install. It's gonna take a couple of minutes, so I'm just gonna go ahead and let that go. And I'll just speed it up for you. You don't need to watch this part. And we're done. So let's go ahead and run. Leave that check. Hit finish. And Alright, we'll go ahead and get started. Here's your disclaimer, standard. Just remember, it's going to basically tell you that it's going to grab some information, send it back. You know, you can always set up a pie hole if you don't want that to happen. You can create an account, but we can skip that. Alright, so here's where we can add a printer. Now, if you have a printer that is networked on the same network as the computer, you can actually try to find the printer that way. And, you could get the IP address from the printer, and most printers have some way to do that within their settings. And that way you can send everything directly through the network. Or we can add a non-network printer, and that's what we're going to do here. Okay. Now, if I remember correctly, the printer that she has is a FlashForge Dreamer NX. We'll go ahead and hit next. Okay. This all can be left exactly the way it is, although you probably want to make sure that everything is correct. These are usually all good. You can get this information from the printer manufacturer, but Ultimaker is actually pretty good at making sure to have the correct default settings. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Okay, we don't need to worry about that. That's just a bunch of what's new stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then finish. All right, and then what you'll see here is actually a representation of the print bed. So we only can print things that are going to fit in the middle there. The other thing that we want to do is we're going to start out by selecting what our filament is. If you do not know, or if it's not on the list, chances are it's PLA. That's the stuff most people use because it's got a nice low melting point. But if you say you specifically have Hatchbox PLA, you can get that here. Or if you know exactly what the brand is and it's on the list. But for the most part, generic PLA will work just fine. Okay, we're going to just make sure that we see it's a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. That's standard for most 3D printers. You can get and check your machine documentation. It will tell you what came with it. That can be changed as well if necessary. Standard quality. So quality is basically how good, how thick the lines are going to be. For pretty much anything, the 0.2 is going to be fine. Now, if you're printing out anything with really fine detail, you can go smaller, but you're going to significantly increase your print time. Infill. Infill is how much of the center of a hollow of a device is actually filled. Now, this is a great place here to save on filament, because in reality, most items do not need more than a 10 to 20% infill. So most people will go with something like a 20% infill. Okay? And then support. We'll get back to that in adhesion. You're going to go ahead and leave that just the way it is. All right? So, now that we've taken a look at these things here real fast, we need to go ahead and grab our STL file. So wherever you get that from, like Tinkercad or anything like that, you just want to go ahead, just grab that STL file that you've downloaded and drop it right there. Look at that. Now, Cura is pretty smart. It actually does a lot of this stuff for you. This looks, but you want to do a little bit of looking at this yourself. So what you want to do is you want to check, is this the best orientation for this print? Okay? And this kind of is. You got some bed, you have connection to the bed, which you need to have. You don't have any free-floating items, but you do have a bridge here, right? Where there's nothing underneath it. So that's when we get up here and we see support, okay? So we're going to select support. And what this will do is it will automatically fill in where you need supports. All right? So once we've gone ahead and told it that we want support and that we want to have it at 20% infill, then we just go ahead and we slice. When we slice, what it's doing is it's generating what's known as Gcode. Okay? Gcode is basically a set of points that it's going to move back and forth to, and whether it's going, and it tells the machine whether it's going to be laying down filament or not laying down filament, retracting. Basically, it's kind of the machine code for the 3D printer. All right? So, now we've got that all taken care of there. Let's go ahead and we can preview the Gcode. Okay? Now what you're seeing here is basically kind of a representation of how it's going to print. The red part, that's your normal filament. The yellow part is just a top surface. You know, but what we really want to look at right here is this blue part. That is what we call supports. Okay, and what it's going to be is basically kind of almost like a very minimum amount of filament that is needed to bridge that gap so that it can draw that line right here. All right, and if we were to go over here, we can chop it down. You kind of see how it's going to print up and how the layers are going to work. All right. Now, one thing I just want to point out with this here is it looks like these are 3 of the exact same item within the STL file. Now, the cool thing is what you need is when you're using a slicer, you only need to have one of the item, and then you can duplicate it as many times as you want in the slicer. And also, it looks like this here was something that was made to generate supports, but if you're using a slicer, you don't need to put those in because the supports will auto-generate. All right, and then what you're going to do is you just go ahead and you save it to disk. Normally, this will be something that you'll save to something like an SD card or a thumb drive, and then you'll take that over to your device. If your device is networked, Cura does have options to send it over the network. Unfortunately, I don't have the same 3D printer, so I can't show that. Okay? But the other thing it does, if you notice here, is it also gives you approximately how long that's going to take. Now, 7 hours, 40 minutes, that is a long time, especially for something that you're not going to be around all the time, right? So here's a couple of ways that we can make that take less time or more time. Okay? So the first thing we could do to make it take less time is we can change the infill amount. Okay? So when we change the infill amount, back over here to prepare, right? So when we change the infill amount and we go ahead and we slice it, so not only are we're using less filament, but it also takes less time. That's not a whole lot less time, right? So the other thing that we can do is we could actually tell it that we want to basically change the resolution. Just like, monitors and TVs have a resolution, like 4K or ultra high HD or something like that. You can think of this here, this layer height, as being kind of the resolution, right? This is something that's fairly blocky. There's not a lot to it. I almost always print here at the 0.2, but you can go ahead and print over at the 3.2 if you just want to see what does this actually look like and get a fairly fast print. So let's see what happens if we move it all the way up to 0.32 and then we slice. Look at that, 4 hours and 12 minutes. And that's just because we're doing a thicker line every time that we go around. Now, will this always work with your machine? No, not really. Sometimes you have to fiddle with it and you have to decide, figure it out. One of the big things that happens with 3D printing all the time, failed prints. Always happen. But one of the things the slicer helps do is it helps keep you from having too many failed prints. Now, if you really want to have some fun, say you're doing something with really high detail, you can come over here and move it up to 0.12. So this is a smaller detail, We go ahead and we slice it. Look at that. 11 hours, 3 minutes. Okay? Not much more when it comes to filament, but 11 hours and 3 minutes. So the smaller the line, the longer it takes. Okay? Sweet spot is usually here at 0.2. The less infill, the shorter it takes. Okay? Supports do add time, but they're necessary for anything that's an overhang like this. The idea is that if it's more than a 45-degree angle, then, or is it more? Yeah. If it's less than a 45-degree angle. Oh, and my geometry is bad. Anyways, but, basically a 45-degree angle you can print. But when you start getting steeper, you need to start having support. This here is a 90-degree angle. Yeah, so more than a 40. This here is a 90-degree angle, so you definitely need support. And last but not least, there are expert ways to set this all up. And I don't know all of them, but there are all sorts of different things that you can change and play with. The speed, the travel, material, and you could set it, manually instead of going by what everything is. You can have different thicknesses for the top and bottom layers, how thick you want your walls to be. You can manually adjust the layer height. And people that are pros at 3D printing will have, tweaked all of these. And if you want to, you can go out there and you can find what people believe is always the word, the optimal settings are. But what I've found is for most people's usage, you can use the defaults and just play with quality. Alrighty. So that's real simple. That's how you can install and use the Utilimaker or Ultimaker Cura Slicer. Have a good day and learn something new.